Okay, Jonathan, let's have a look at your project exam 2. And your main communication method here is the Nora forums. You're going to use WeTransfer to share files. Your naming convention is going to be project exam water flood name version, and you're going to pop it onto your hard drive for backups. All right, I mean, I think you could go into a little bit more depth in terms of how often are you going to do backups, where you're going to be doing it, what type of drive it is. Little things like that. It's probably going to help you. And then your project kind of timeline, your Gantt project, your Gantt chart over here is HDRI, recording HDRI and match moving, and then you just have water simulation for the entire rest of the time. I think that's not really fair. I think you need to have compositing in there. Probably you're going to have some modeling because you were modeling the quite a lot of things. You're definitely going to be rendering in there. You're definitely going to be having things like iterations and version 1s and version 2s in there, things like that. I think this is the type of timeline or deadline that you can't really hold yourself accountable to, simply because it doesn't really have a lot of information on it. Now, of course, as soon as you start to micro kind of plan this, it becomes really difficult to do it, to use it, because you have all these tiny deadlines that you have to meet each hour, and life isn't like that. But I think something like this is just an entire month, 2 months of water sim. Imagine you have a film and you need to plan how you're going to actually deliver this water sim. If this was a shot in a film, you can't just say, I'm going to work on it for 2 months. You do need to say, well, I'll have version 1 ready over here. Then we'll do a little test comp over here. And so you'll see at least the idea in week 1. And then we'll refine that and we'll update the textures. And then we'll do a lighting pass and we'll improve it and we'll go forward like that. So just think of it like that. Think of it as, you being part of a process and you need to deliver this. And it's not just something that you need to deliver. You definitely, VFX is a team sport and you need to be part of the team. So this is great. Your breakdown sheet is the flood, and the character is laying in his bed when he suddenly realizes that the room is being flooded with water. It will be shot with the bed, from the bed with a slight panning to get the perspective from the person in the bed. And remember, we spoke about this on the forums that you will struggle with tracking something if it's just panning and very little parallax. Water sim on objects interacting with it, and you need an HDRI. Did you shoot an HDRI? Because that's definitely going to help your lighting, and you're going to comp the water. Obviously, you've found out that just comping it is not as easy as you probably thought it was going to be. But let's get into it and have a look at what you have here. This is just one frame. Let me just see if I can load in the sequence. Oh, that's just 4 frames. I just have 4 frames from you for this. So clearly this didn't upload properly or something is wrong there. But I do have the different shots here that we can look at. So let me and these are all MP4s. So that's your foot going into the water. That's the shot over here. I have to admit that I think the tracking works quite well here. There's the breakdown showing the scene, or at least the 3D render. So that's quite useful. That's showing exactly kind of what your render is. And I see you are using a HDRI just because I can tell from the reflections. Yep. And let's quickly go here. This is the second shot. That's your bed. Is that curtains or this big light change at the bottom here? I'm just noticing that. I don't know if that's the curtains letting in more or less light, but that's obviously something that you need to consider in your comp just to make it more realistic. And let's move on to the next one. It's this breakdown. Let's look at that again. Oh, you've got this flash that I know you were correcting in the in the portfolio module. Don't really understand what is happening. Is that going behind the radiator? Is that what's happening? Okay, probably something like that. Yeah, it's the radiator, right? What is that? Yeah, okay. I mean, I think this looks. I still think, and we have spoken about this. This is probably the shot that looks the weirdest. A big part of it, to be completely honest, is this kind of weird these lines that you have going here, and the texture is not that great. I mean, you can tell that whatever this is, I'm not sure what that is, that texture is kind of stuck on there. I mean, your foot also does cut off over here, and it doesn't look like a foot. That's, I think, the biggest thing here. If I wouldn't really know what this is if I just saw it. But I know this is a challenge, and you've got all of this that you need to deal with. And in reality, you would go shoot elements and use that. You wouldn't sim that. But all in all, these shots look great. I remember we were talking about doing weight maps, which you've done. Feels like that weight map is moving, or is that the reflection? I'm not quite sure. I don't really know why this is going darker over here, because this would really be brighter if the light is bouncing off it and back onto it. Unless that's the wet mat. If it's the wet mat, then I don't know why it's moving. Maybe that's just something that you can have a look at. Other thing here is, of course, you have cables going into the water, which you probably didn't take into account. Best thing here is just clean them out. Just comp those cables out so that you don't have the issue of them going into the water. Because at the moment it looks a bit strange. You have these cables that's not interacting with the water. Let's go back to visibility over there. So maybe you could just take them out, clone them out, do something there. Let's quickly look at this. So I'm assuming these are the texture projections based on Quibus's feedback. And I'm not going to give you too much specific feedback because I feel like we have spoken about this shot in the live consultations a few times. So I don't really think technically there's too much left for me to really break down for you and to discuss. If there is anything specific that you want to know at the end of this, let me know. But I think this is probably what I was talking about with the wet maps. You see, this is the highest point where that water goes up. So obviously it's going to be dry here, and then it goes up, whoop, and that's the highest point. Now, from this point onwards, when the water drops, it's definitely going to leave some kind of mark on your table leg over there. That's one of the really big things that I felt was lacking in this project. Also, you have light curtain movements, things here that didn't really nail in the comp. You can see all of that lighting effects that you're not mimicking that in the water. That's something to look at. But really, I feel like these weight maps will really make a massive difference in the realism that's perceived, because all of a sudden you have the reflections which are interacting, but you don't have that weightness, between the two where it's touching. It's the only thing that I think is missing on here. I know technically these shots are quite difficult. It is quite funny looking at you in the reflection there. Would have been cool if you added some kind of news broadcast onto the TV, something like tsunami, some kind of flood warning, something like that onto the TV. That would be quite nice. I don't know if you still have time to do that. It could be quite cool, like a little news broadcast, big wave or something like that. I'm not going to discuss these too much. And I think that's it. I think these shots are good. I do feel like, they still need a bit of finessing in the comp side, maybe to mimic this light interaction a little bit more, or the wet maps a little bit more. then that's about it from my side. We do have the flashing here that I know you did clone out in the portfolio. And besides that, I think the only thing here that's going to make this more realistic is obviously depending on where the water came from. If it came through a window, you could add debris and leaves and things floating on the water, but that's more of an art direction kind of note. Technically, I think the shot works, but from an art director kind of point of view, it's a few things that I think you would need to want to change, and that's water against the wall here would splash up and interact with the wall at the back. It's just there's very little logic in the water not really affecting the items around it. Great. Well, if you have any other questions, please let me know. And yep, thanks for your absolute great work.